August 2021. Marek stands in a barn on Roloff Farms, a few weeks shy of his 59th birthday, marrying for the first time in his life. No previous wife, no children. He had spent his entire adult life as a bachelor, selling real estate in the Portland suburbs, riding motorcycles on his own schedule, answering to nobody. Then he signed a marriage license and acquired 4 adult stepchildren and 8 grandchildren in a single afternoon. None of them had asked for him. That is the part people skip past. Adult children do not get consulted about their mother's second husband. They get informed. Zach, Jeremy, Molly, and Jacob were grown, married or nearly so, running their own households, with decades of established family patterns that Chris had no part in forming. He was not joining a family, he was being inserted into one, and this particular family was already at war with itself. Consider the terrain Chris walked into. Amy and Matt had ended a 29-year marriage. The property their 4 children grew up on was in dispute. Zach and Matt would stop speaking. Jeremy had already moved off the farm. Jacob had publicly torched the television production that made the family famous. Every relationship in the house had a fracture line running through it, and millions of strangers watched the fractures widen on cable television every Tuesday. Into that, a quiet realtor from West Lynn. Here is what he did, and the whole thing comes down to a single decision he made early and never broke. Chris never competed with Matt Roloff. Not once. He did not audition for the role of better father. He did not offer his opinion on the farm dispute. He did not encourage the kids to prefer him. He did not position himself as the reasonable man who had arrived to fix what Matt had broken. Every one of those moves was available to him and would have felt natural, and he declined all of them. That restraint is the reason the rest of this worked. Take Zach first, because Zach was the hardest. Zach Roloff was born on January 10, 1990, the elder twin by minutes. He is the only one of the 4 children who inherited his parents' dwarfism, which shaped his childhood in ways his siblings never experienced. He is also, by a wide margin, the sibling most tangled in the family's public conflicts. He fought with his father over the farm. He and Tori sold their Portland house and moved north across the state line to Battleground, Washington. He pulled his children back from the cameras. He built a podcast, Raising Heights, partly so he could say things in his own words instead of having them cut into an episode. A man in that position has every reason to view his mother's new husband as one more complication. One more person with opinions about a family that already has too many. One more adult in the room during the holidays. Chris gave him none of that. He did not weigh in on the Zach and Matt situation. Not on camera, not in interviews, not in the comments. When the farm negotiations collapsed, Chris was silent. When Zach spoke publicly about his father, Chris did not respond. He treated the feud as somebody else's business, which it was, and stayed inside his own lane, which was being married to Zach's mother. He also did not chase. Chris did not text Zach constantly, did not push for one-on-one time, did not perform enthusiasm. He showed up where he was invited, was pleasant, and went home. Understand how unusual that is. The instinct of almost every new step-parent is to accelerate. Prove your worth. Demonstrate that you belong. Send the message, make the gesture, close the distance before anyone decides you are not welcome. It comes from insecurity, and adult stepchildren smell it immediately. Chris had the confidence to be boring. He was 54 when he met Amy, established in a career, financially independent, with a house of his own in West Lynn, and no need to be liked by anybody's children in order to feel settled. He was not auditioning. That is a very different energy to walk into a room carrying, and people register it even when they cannot name it. Slowly, that got him somewhere. Zach has said publicly that his relationship with Amy is solid, that his mother is someone he and Tori can call at any hour. Chris is inside that circle by virtue of being Amy's husband and by never having given Zach a reason to want him out of it. A second thing worked in Chris's favor with Zach, quieter than the first. Chris is average height. He has no personal experience of dwarfism, none of the shared history Zach has with his parents, no claim to understanding what Zach's childhood was like, which meant Chris never once made the mistake of pretending he understood. He did not offer perspective on something he had not lived. Some people find that kind of humility easy, most do not. The visible proof came at Christmas of 2025. When Isabel Roloff posted the family photos from December 26th, Chris was on that couch in the same striped sweater as everyone else, standing with Matt's sons at a gathering that would have been unthinkable 3 years earlier. Zach was there. His children were there. Nobody was performing tolerance. You cannot manufacture that. You can only earn it, slowly, by not being a problem for long enough that people forget to brace when you walk in. Jacob is the second interesting case, for the opposite reason. Jacob Roloff, born January 17, 1997, is the youngest and the one who left. He walked away from filming in 2016 as a teenager and then spent years saying out loud what most reality television children only think. He questioned what it does to a childhood. He questioned the ethics of the format. He had no interest in the family business of being watched. A person that skeptical of institutions is not going to hand out affection to a new stepfather because the calendar says he should. Asked about Chris on camera, Jacob has landed somewhere close to indifference. His mother's husband. Seems like a decent man. Nothing further to report. That sounds like a failure. It is not. Jacob has no vacancy for a second father. Chris is not applying for the post. Both men understand this and neither has ever pushed. The result is two adults who can share a kitchen, a farm, a dinner table, and a holiday without any friction at all, because there is no unspoken expectation for either of them to disappoint. That changed in 2022. Matt asked him to come back and run the farm, and Jacob said yes. Jacob now works that property full-time. Isabel runs its social channels and cares for the animals. Chris turns up during pumpkin season, running private tours for visitors who pay for the guided version. So the two of them cross paths regularly, in a working context, without the pressure of a manufactured bond. Jacob was in the matching sweater at Christmas 2025 too, standing near Chris. Not because either of them needed the other, because they both belong there. Jeremy was the easiest of the four, and the reason is almost boring. Jeremy Roloff, born the same January morning as Zach, is a private, conservative Christian family man who runs his own businesses. He and Audrey have 4 children and a life in Oregon well away from Roloff Farms. He is not a man who invites strangers close, but he and Chris had something to talk about. Property investment and management have been part of Jeremy's working life for years. Chris has carried a real estate license for over 2 decades. Put them at the same table at a family event, and there is an immediate, genuine, non-awkward conversation available. Oregon market conditions, interest rates, what a property in a given school district is actually worth, whether a listing is priced to move. Shared professional ground is enormously underrated in blended families. It gives 2 men who have no obligation to like each other a reason to talk that has nothing to do with the woman who connects them. It converts obligatory contact into ordinary contact. There is also a practical dimension. When Amy went looking for her own house after the divorce, Chris was her agent. The Hillsborough property she bought in 2019 came through his professional work. Jeremy, who understands what that transaction involves, could see exactly what Chris had done for his mother. Found her a home that suited a little person's needs, handled the negotiation, and did it without drama. Competence is its own kind of introduction. It told Jeremy something about Chris that no amount of holiday small talk would have communicated. Jeremy and Chris are not close in the way brothers are close. They do not call each other, but they are cordial, they are respectful, and they enjoy each other's company when the family assembles. For a stepson and a stepfather who met when the stepson was already an adult, that is not a consolation prize. That is the realistic ceiling, and they reached it. Molly is the quietest chapter, and the one most likely to be misread. Molly Roloff, now Molly Silvius, was born on September 17, 1993, which is also Amy's birthday. She is the only daughter. Whitworth University, then a 2017 wedding to Joel Silvius, then a move north to Spokane. Nordstrom employs her in a senior accounting role. The couple have not had children. She appears on social media rarely and on television almost never. Her relationship with Chris has produced no scenes, no conflicts, and very little visible evidence of anything at all. That is not coldness. That is geography and temperament. Molly lives 350 miles from Portland. She has a demanding professional career, a private marriage, and a stated preference for staying out of the family's public life. She sees Chris when family logistics bring them together. She attended the August 2021 wedding. She comes for holidays when she and Joel travel to Oregon. Plans get coordinated through Amy, which is how it usually works when adult children live far away. Warm but distant is a perfectly functional outcome. Chris has respected Molly's privacy rather than trying to breach it, which is exactly what a stepfather should do with an adult stepdaughter who has made her preferences plain. Pushing would have cost him something. Waiting cost him nothing. There is an easy trap here that Chris avoided. A new stepfather who reads distance as rejection will start working to close it, and the working itself becomes the problem. Extra calls, pointed gifts, comments about how they never see each other. Molly did not need managing. She needed to be left alone in the way that private people need to be left alone, and then welcomed without commentary whenever she turned up. That is what she got. Their relationship is also mediated, sensibly, through Amy. Mother and daughter share a birthday, September 17th, which means Molly's calendar and Amy's calendar have been fused since 1993. Holiday plans, travel dates, who is coming when, that traffic runs through Amy, as it does in most families with adult children living several states away. Chris does not need a separate channel to Spokane. He has the one that matters. The grandchildren were a different job entirely. There are 8 of them now: Jackson and Ember, Lila and Bodie, Mateo, Radley, Josiah, and Mirabella. Chris had none before Amy. He arrived at the role with no practice, no instincts developed over decades, and no biological claim on any of them. Small children are simpler than adults in one useful respect. They do not run background checks. They do not weigh whether your presence constitutes a betrayal of their grandfather. They decide whether they like you based on whether you are around and whether you are kind. And Chris has been both. He goes to the birthdays. He is there at Christmas. He has watched several of these children go from newborn to running around a pumpkin patch. The grandkids have their own names for him, which vary, as those things do. The farm helps. Roloff Farms is where this family assembles, and during October it becomes a genuine workplace with thousands of visitors moving through it. Grandchildren are underfoot, adults are busy, Chris has a job to do out there. Children form their strongest attachments to adults they see doing things, rather than adults who sit and ask them questions. And a step-grandfather leading a tour past the western town is a more interesting figure than one making conversation on a sofa. Amy's public line on it has been simple enough. The grandchildren love him, and his kindness toward them has never wavered. What she has not had to say, because it is visible, is that he never tried to be Grandpa Matt. Matt is Grandpa. Chris is something else, on his own terms, added rather than substituted. The children have room for both, and nobody has asked them to choose. Ask what all of this cost Chris, and the answer is more than it looks. Restraint is expensive. Every time Zach and Matt went at each other in public, Chris had an opinion he did not voice. Every time a producer would have loved a confessional segment about the family drama, he had material he did not use. Every time it would have been easier to be liked by taking somebody's side, he chose the harder version of being trusted by everyone. He also gave up a certain amount of himself. A man who spent 54 years answering to nobody now has 4 adult stepchildren's schedules, 8 grandchildren's birthdays, holiday logistics across 2 states, and a farm that consumes every October. That is not a small trade for a bachelor realtor with a motorcycle and a habit of disappearing to Alaska for 18 days at a stretch. He made the trade anyway. None of this happened quickly, and Amy deserves credit for controlling the pace. They met at a paint and sip mixer in late 2016, and she did not march him into a family dinner the following weekend. Introductions came out slowly across 2017 and 2018, one at a time, on no particular schedule. By the time Chris proposed in September of 2019, all 4 had known him for years and formed their own conclusions without anyone standing over them. The engagement then ran nearly 2 years before the wedding in August of 2021, partly because of the pandemic and partly because Amy was in no hurry. All 4 of her children attended, 5 years from first meeting to wedding day. That patience is the second reason this worked. Nobody was rushed into accepting anything, so nobody had a reason to resist. Compare that with how it usually goes. A newly divorced parent meets someone, the relationship accelerates, and the adult children get a fiancé at Thanksgiving they had barely met by Labor Day. Resistance in that situation is not really about the new partner. It is about the pace. People push back against being presented with a finished decision. Amy never presented anyone with a finished decision. She let her children watch a relationship develop in real time over 5 years and form their conclusions before anything was final. There was one more complication she had to manage, and it was not small. The whole courtship was filmed. Chris met the family in front of a production crew, on a network that needed conflict to fill episodes. Every awkward first conversation was a potential storyline. That Amy still controlled the pace under that pressure, rather than letting the cameras dictate it, says a good deal about her. There is one more factor, and it belongs to Matt as much as to Chris. Because Chris and Matt built a genuine friendship rather than a rivalry, the 4 children were never forced to choose. No one had to worry about hurting their father by being warm to their stepfather. The 2 men at the top of the structure decided the family could hold everyone at once, and that decision cascaded down through the spouses to the grandchildren. Blended families usually fail on exactly that point. Someone insists on being chosen. Nobody here did. Consider what Chris actually got out of this. He was in his mid-50s, unmarried, childless, with a real estate practice and a motorcycle and no family unit beyond his own parents and siblings. Men in that position generally do not acquire a large extended family. The window is understood to have closed. Then it opened. 4 adult stepchildren, 8 grandchildren, a place at a crowded table every holiday, a role at a farm that draws tens of thousands of visitors each October, a photograph on December 26, 2025, in which he is wearing the same sweater as the sons of the man his wife used to be married to. He did not get there by being remarkable. He got there by being steady, staying out of fights that were not his, refusing every opportunity to compete, and waiting for people to arrive at their own conclusions on their own schedules. By 2026, the 4 of them are scattered across 2 states and busy with their own households. 3 children up in Battleground, 4 more down in Oregon, a quiet professional life in Spokane, and a working farm outside Hillsboro. Chris remains where he has been since 2016, next to Amy, showing up. 4 separate relationships, 4 different depths, every one of them is real. Which of Amy's 4 kids do you think has the closest bond with Chris? Was staying silent during the Zach and Matt feud the smartest thing Chris ever did, or should he have said something? And do you think a stepfather who arrives after the children are already grown can ever be more than a good guest?